Hello, everyone. I didn't expect so many people. My name is Maxim Oleshuk, but you can just call me Max, which aligns perfectly with our today's topic. Accessibility is much more accessible name. So I am an Android developer and a usual DroidCon Berlin attendee in the role of listener, but this topic got me generally excited and I really wanted to share it with you. Therefore, I had to come up here and give my first talk. So let's see. As we all know, the accessibility is not the most exciting topic, and it's oftentimes gets deprioritized in favor of a sleek graphic, flashy animation, or yet another super promised A/B test that will boost our revenue by 0.1%. But today I would really want to show you why this topic deserves our attention, and we'll try to convince you to improve your app accessibility. But even if I can't, sorry to tell you, but we have EA now, you still have to do it. So yeah. I traveled here from Germany, where for the last 5 years, I've been working in a brilliant company called Autada, and we provide identification solutions for reading out ID cards using NFC or OCR. And as of recently, we also launched an EU wallet app. And for the last couple of months, we've been intensely focusing on making our products more accessible, and it hasn't been easy, and it's not always the very straightforward process, as I learned. So today what we will discuss is what actually is EAA, the types of disabilities, and then we will cover the WCAG level. Some people call it WCAG, others WCAG. I don't know what's ruled. So let's say WCAG levels, and especially level A and AA, because these are actually that are required by the EAA. And then we draw some conclusions, and I will try to accompany all of these points with some examples from real life, so it should be easier to follow, hopefully. So what's EAA? So it stands for European Accessibility Act, and it's also known as directive with these numbers. The important thing is the number 2019. Keep in mind this. I will show it later why it's important. So, and directive is just like a subtype of law on European level that each EU member state has to transpose, is a legal word for this, into their own legislation. But a developer-friendly explanation would be of transpose is implement. So therefore, EA would be like an interface. Each EU member state would be a class which would implement the basic structure from EAA, but they can also override it and they can extend it. So it's a bit messy. Yes, and what EA attempts to do is actually to harmonize different approaches between the EU countries, because previously each EU country would judge as they see fit how to make their own products accessible, but this EAA tries to make it the same in all the European Union. And the goal is to ensure that people that have disabilities or they have temporarily difficult or pregnant women and so on can easily access information and can be more independent in using communication services or access to public buildings, for example. And EA has some deadlines. So the biggest deadline is June 28th, 2025. And by that time, we all have to be EA compliant. But anyway, it's not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I just read these documents, but if I understood them properly or not legally, I don't know. So they defined a 5 years of grace period, meaning that if your product is super legacy, it's oftentimes hard to make it just accessible right from the start until that date. Therefore, they define this for software is some kind of 5 years, and for different other components, it's a different timeline. But tricky part is that each EU member state, as you know from before, can decide to shorten this transition period. Therefore, you have to check with the legal team, because they can check it, shorten it depending on type of software you provide or the service. And they can add extra requirement for you as well. And European Commission will set up an oversee that will be consistent of different disability organization, and they will be checking if actually the EA is being followed. And as well, the EU national authorities themselves have to also do this check, but will they do it or they won't do it? I don't know, we'll see. Okay. In any case, my recommendation would be that you already document all of your efforts of following the EA, because if it comes up, it's good to have it on paper. What's in scope? So TLDR, everything is in scope. So access to public buildings, computers, banking services. So let's say example of ATM or the self-checkout kiosk, for example. It should be accessible, meaning it should be at a specific height so the person in wheelchair can access it. The button should be pressable by a specific force applied to it, so a person with weakness can press it as well. Because it's a closed system, for example, you cannot install any assistive technologies that you can install on your mobile phone. Therefore, it should come up with out of the box with alternative input and output methods. EAA defines some exception for this. So if you are a micro enterprise, so you're less than 10 people, or your annual turnover is less than 2 million euros per year, for now you're exempt of this rule, but you have to be vigilant, because once you stop being a micro enterprise, all of these rules right away will be applied to you. And kind of B2B, again, not legal advice. So B2B, so EA is a B2C law. So, but even in a B2B context, if you, for example, provide your app as a service, for example, you have your business partner that jumps into your app to perform some actions and jump back away from it. If this business partner will now want to be EA compliant and they use you as a part of their process, and for example, you're not compliant, they will probably be seeking for a different business partner, because it automatically makes them responsible for using you, for using your software. Okay, so I borrowed this idea from Microsoft. Actually, they have an amazing guide for inclusive design, and they are challenging the traditional view of disability. So disability is not a personal health condition, it's just the mismatch of human interaction, meaning that it occurs when people's ability do not match the environment they're in. We can have an example of a deaf person who doesn't hear. So they're not inherently disabled. They can communicate with each other using sign language, they can navigate through daily life. But the moment when they try to consume a content like a YouTube video or some other source that lacks captions, that's the moment that the barrier is created in front of them, and that's the moment they would realize that they have a problem. And we as developers who develop app, we should not think about an average user, because average user, quotes, does not exist. And we have to have this disability mindset, which says there is no one true way to use a computer, because all of us use computers differently. We all experience different problems with our computers, but just because, due to a variety of human experience, some are more often than the others. If you already went on the accessibility road, you probably have seen this graph, this matrix. But for those who do not know it, I'll talk about it real quick. So disabilities can have a different time span. You can have, let's take a first row. You can have a permanent solution, like a person lacks one arm. Then they have a temporary. Maybe you just broken your arm, and for the next 2 months you are disabled. Or it's situation, you have a newborn baby, you hold the baby with one hand, and with the other hand you have to do your daily activities. But the good thing is, once we fix our apps for a person with permanent solution, automatically all of the others can benefit. So if you take example of a blind person, and if we enable voice commands in our app or voice output, it works with talkback well, then a distracted driver who is actually driving and has to focus on the screen or can still use the app, maybe to change an audio track or something using voice commands. Therefore, everyone benefits. And this term is called the curb cut effect. So in this sketch, the city authorities decided to cut the curb so the person in wheelchair can cross the road, but the person now delivering packages or the cyclist or the traveler can now all benefit from the same solution. And because we're on developer conference, how does it apply for the apps? It's most likely that the person choosing between two apps, will choose the one which is more accessible, just because it's more likely to have the correct contrast, that it doesn't hurt your eyes. The buttons are in predictable spaces, the buttons are predictable size, navigation works smoothly. Therefore, it's important for everyone. Now, this is the most difficult part of the conversation, and some people find it useful, other people find it's actually boring and complicated to follow. But let's try to walk through it. So these are the terms we will most likely encounter when you trying to be EA compliant. So we have WCAG, we have the EN 301-549 document, and then we have the EAA itself. So WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and it's a list of ISO certified list of technical standards. But it's not a law by itself. It's not a legally binding document. It becomes legally binding, though, not a legal advice, once it gets referenced in official EU legislation. Therefore, we have the EN 301 document, which references highly the WCAG, and it describes how technically to apply the EA. And it's a really complicated document with a lot of graphs and different tables and matrices, difficult to read. And it's called Harmonized European Standard. And to oversee it all, we have the EA. And EA answers for the question of why do we have to be accessible and what exactly has to be accessible. Now comes the messy part, because this is a current state and you can see it's not harmonized with EA. What does it mean? So the EN 301, the version 321 is the current version that we have right now, but it's actually referenced the WCAG, which is outdated, so 2.1, while we already have 2.2. And as well, it's harmonized, but not with the EA, which we actually need. So it's harmonized with EA from 2016, which was called back then the WCAG, which was Web Accessibility Directive. And therefore, we have current WCAG is 2.2, current EA is 2.19, but the official technical requirement is still in draft. Good news, it's a stable draft, so you already can read it. If you log in to some specific web page, difficult to find. And ironic that we have a deadline on June 28th, but it's most likely due to bureaucratic processes in the EU. We won't have the technical guideline voted until then. So my recommendation would be that we just follow the EA itself. And as of now, we can only have the presumption of conformity because we cannot be confirmed legally. But again, not legal advice. And here is the slide with all of these links. You can find it. I will show the QR code in the end as well. And that's actually describes me perfectly trying to understand all of this. But if you want to have just a smooth entrance to EAA, I would recommend you this website. So it's from Abt Foundation from the Netherlands, and it's open source project. You can contribute your findings to it. And it's good resource. It specifies the rules, and it also provides the solutions how to fix them based on your tech stack. So you can use Compose or whatever you like. Now, the WCAG itself has 3 accessibility levels. And so we have A, AA, and AAA, and each one contains the rules from level below and their own rules. So now we have A. It's a minimum requirement and you have to do it. So it's a really urgent priority. Then we have AA, which is the one which EA requires, so AA and A. But then if you need a karma boost, you have a AAA. And who needs to follow AAA are, for example, the government organization, government websites. And if you develop software exactly for the people that targets people with disabilities. But if you do that, you probably already know. And there's a big number of criteria, so don't be afraid of those rules. We won't attempt to go through all of them, but I will go through some which I feel like will be a safe bet that will get you 80% of there, and then they kind of align with each other and it gets clearer. Okay, now, finally we got to the first rule. It's text alternative. So if your screen or your website provides some information, usually not textual means by audio or image, it has to provide the same level of information as in textual way. It's our favorite content descriptions or captions, for example. How many of you actually use TalkBack or Switch or some of the assistive tech? Okay, not a lot of you. Probably didn't have a bad experience with your app. Okay, so let's take this screen, for example. If you're a person that perceives information visually, you can understand that you have to enter 6 digits there, and then you probably have to press this arrow button to navigate to confirm your PIN. But if we want to have a content descriptions for the person that cannot see, that have to perceive what should happen, I cannot stress enough how many times I've seen content descriptions on images that look like this arrow icon. Maybe someone then come up and say, actually, we have 2 arrow icons. You have back one and forward. So let's be more specific and say arrow to the right icon. Yes, fixed solution. So person who actually uses a talkback or assistive tag every day would understand what it means, but why would we make it more complicated and leave the room for interpretation? We can just right away put a good content description, which will say confirm your PIN entry. So the rule here is that we do not describe what's on the image. We describe what will happen once the user presses a specific element. And not all the images have to have content descriptions, because if, for example, this image, it provides no meaning, and it's more important for the user probably to read the title, which says invalid dead code, which provides information. By focusing on the image and reading the content description from there, we just create a noise, which user has to have an extra action just to skip it and go forward. So how can we fix it? In XML, we just did not put content description, and then assistive tag would just ignore it. But in Compose, we actually have to explicitly specify and say it's null. By doing that, yes, it fixed, so the image will be ignored. But some of you may notice already that how can I test it? Because so many people rely on content description to see if the element is being rendered on the screen in their tests. There is a fix. So we can make the content description null and then just add the semantics test tag. And then in your test, instead of checking if the content description is on the screen, you check if this test tag is on the screen. But let's assume that you created your own cool UI testing framework that only tests with content description, and really to rewrite all of your tests using test tags is not an option. You can still use your content description like here. You can keep it, and then you can define semantics invisible to the user, or in XML, it was good name important for accessibility, no. And then the assistive tag would just ignore it. This invisible to user is, as of now, it's not a very good name, I would say, but in Compose 1.8.0, they promised to rename it to hide from accessibility, which makes me happy. Alternative input. So the WCAG rule says you have to support the keyboard, but it's much more than the keyboard itself. And first, why would we have it? Many people may be suffering from weakness or extreme stiffness in their limbs and so many other different problems. And here's just an example of how many keyboards you can have. It's not exhaustive list at all. And on the right, you can see this device is called Switch. And the switches also come in so many different shapes. You have 4 buttons, 2 buttons. You can have, if the person is, for example, paralyzed below their neck, they can have a mouthpiece which they bite. And Switch as a device, it allows you to jump to the next element. And then if the person double taps on it, it activates this element. There is switches that track your eye movements, for example, and then when you blink once, it goes next, blink twice, it activates. The good thing is that from the Android OS, once you have the support for keyboard, you can test with your keyboards. And once you have that, most likely all of these elements, all of these switches will also work. And all of the interactive elements should be focusable. This is the rule by the keyboard, and do not do the keyboard trap. What's a keyboard trap? It's something like this. So you might have a custom pop-up, and then once you press the next button, the custom pop-ups appears, but the assistive tag would not react to it, and the focus would still be behind the pop-up, and effectively user here is trapped because they cannot jump levels in the focus, because whenever they would try to switch it, it will just go behind the pop-up. And this is a trap. Or the bottom sheets. As I understood, it's not very likable elements in the communities because they're hard to dismiss. Sometimes you have to swipe down, and swiping down with the keyboard is a Herculean task, and Yeah. Next rule, name role value. So assistive tech should understand all of the components. What does it mean? Again, the same screen. Now you have the purple text, for example, does your PIN only have 5 digits? Again, if you consume your content visually, you understand, you can click on it and something will probably happen. But from a historical reason, this screen, this text for us was just the text, not a text button, and it was just a clickable element. Therefore, TalkBack would say, does your PIN only have 5 digits? Double tap to activate. It helps, so user understand they can activate it. But normally, when you have a clickable element, you should say that it's also a button, that it's not some random element. And the easiest solution would be here to just make it a text button to have it. So the rule is, if it quacks like a duck, make it a duck. If it looks like a button or does stuff that button does, make it a button. But let's say your layout is too complex, you cannot just go and refactor and change it, and you should give the role of something which the element is not. So in this example, you can fix this text if you don't want to use text button by, in XML, you would just override this accessibility delegate and specify here in class name that it's a button, even though it's a text. And in compose as well, you can set semantics and assign a role. And it's a button imposter because it's a box, but the talkback here will read it as a button. Don't do it as a last resort, really, because also role itself also has other components. So button also has enabled, disabled state, and so other different things that accessive technology can read. Now, the most difficult one, I would say, the orientation of your device. So one may ask why orientation is accessibility feature, because I certainly had the same question. I felt like it's just a user preference, and so many apps just lock their apps in the portrait mode, and that's it. So here is a AI-generated image, but it's actually a real representation of the wheelchair with a hard-mounted tablet on a wheelchair. And then this person, for example, would have to rotate this device just to enjoy your app's experience, which is difficult. Therefore, orientation is accessibility. And the same screen, now, once I rotated it, this is expected result, of course, this happened. The easiest solution here would be to make it scrollable. You can do it. It's a viable solution, so nowhere in the documentation I read that scrollable elements are not good. So you can scroll. Just make sure that all the elements that currently in focus, if you navigate with a switch, should be visible as well on the screen, but usually Android OS does it good from out of the box. But as Android best practices tell us, we have to use our space on the screen properly. So we have to prioritize swapping of components instead of stretching the components. So another solution would be here, you just split it in half and then user can enjoy the screen. I have here done a mistake, just as a quick note. I assumed the physical orientation of device, which I would not recommend doing, because we can have a tablet, we can have a foldable, we can have external monitors plugged in vertically, horizontally, you name it. You can have a split mode. So here, for example, the phone is in portrait mode per se on the right, but actually it's, yeah, I don't know if it's the best solution, but it has definitely more space horizontally. Therefore, horizontal layout would fit here. So if I would assume the vertical space, the physical orientation of device, it will be broken. And it's not up to us to enforce the orientation of device. If user wants a specific orientation, they can swipe down their notification tray and lock their phones if they want to on portrait or landscape. And use the Compose Material 3 adaptive library to use the window classes from there to define the actual size of the device. And if you and I would recommend also this talk from Pat and Alex about the adaptive layouts, and I learned a lot of it, and it's really time for a mindset shift, because you don't have to think about physical phone, but rather on exact space you currently have on your screen right now. Now, my favorite rule, text resizable. So EAA tells us that our apps have to support 200% font increase without loss of functionality. That's really difficult thing to do. So here I selected, here's the working app now. I selected the smallest simulator I could find and increase the size. So basically, if you swipe it to the font selector to the end, it's 200% exactly. Your layout would probably not look pretty. If you can do it pretty, please do it. That's good. But most likely it won't. And what the important part is that users still can access the information that they came in your app for. And we use SPs, yes, as we all know, in Android we use SPs for scalable points, and then if you use SPs, the font will automatically scale with the user settings. But if, for example, some of the elements you do not want to scale, and it's a valid reason, so EAA tells us if your layout by scaling would lose its meaning, so here is a perfect example, the numpad. If I would now allow huge scaling, and I will end up with having one button in the row, in everything will be in column, that will lose its semantical meaning. Therefore, you can avoid scaling of some of the elements by using DPs instead of SPs as a font size. I would recommend using the preview font scale and your composables, so you can, during runtime, just preview how it will look like without deploying it. Now, next two rules. There are two separate rules, but I believe they are really interconnected. So first is meaningful sequence, that element has to be positioned in a way that more people understand. What does it mean? It's pretty easy. So do not put your title at the bottom, for example, and your back button and, I don't know, on the right. So just make an understandable layout. And focus order would tell us that the elements when using assistive tag have to receive the focus in a meaningful way. So do not read the bottom element, then the focus jumps to the top, then jumps to the right, to the left, because person might be having some cognitive limitations. And by doing this roller coaster with not understandable UI, you basically exclude these persons from your app. Here is an example of a famous German banking app, actually. Won't tell the name. So if you perceive, so here's the back button, it's in the bottom. So if you perceive content visually, it's actually pretty comfortable, I would say, to have it in the bottom. But if you do not see what the person would do, they will look for the button at the top where every other app has it. And by having it in the bottom, it will be extra step to find it. And as well, these buttons are inconsistent. So it's kind of the same screen, but one is like this, another like this, but different story. And with focus order, I actually had myself with the same famous screen and very peculiar experience. So after refactoring, I was super happy. So my app was rotating, resizing, the font was scaling perfect. What else could go wrong? And something could go wrong. So whenever I enable talkback, a user would appear on this screen, the first element to be read would be one button, double tap to activate, without giving context, without giving anything. And then user would have to go and actually find out what the screen is about. And really long investigation of this topic, I think I understood it. So my best explanation as of now, I had two constraint layouts, so nested, don't do that, by the way. So constraint layouts, constraint layouts can delay child composition on the screen. And this happened that talkback or assistive tag, if the thing gets layouted first, and usually we lay it from top to bottom, so title is layouted first, then the assistive tag would assume that this is the most important element and would read it. But in this case, because it got delayed, so the numpad was rendered first, was layouted first, therefore assistive tag thought, okay, numpad is probably my title, I will probably read it. So two fixes here. You can flatten your hierarchy as I did, but probably not the most useful example for you to go to stakeholders and say, I need 3 days because the focus is off. Good luck selling that. So you can have a different solution. So here you have the complex layout that you cannot rewrite. And inside of that, you can define the traversal groups. And inside of this traversal group, now you can specify the index in which you want your elements to actually be read. So by saying -1, you say this element is the most important one for accessibility. The other ones you have to read one by one. Okay, probably you had too much accessibility. And let's have one more, and that's it. And then we draw some conclusions. So the target size, we all know this. So in Android, we have to have target clickable size 48 dps. And in iOS, it's, for general information, 44 points. Here is the interesting part, though. This was previously as a AAA requirement, and as of recently, it was moved to AA requirement. Therefore, be vigilant, because these rules like to move like these chairs in Harry Potter. So if you have someone in your team that could track this this movement, that would be great. Okay, why do we have the touch target size? So people might have the motor impairment or visual impairment, or people might just be like me, fat-fingered. It's a term actually, and typing is actually really difficult for me as well. Yes, okay, general information. But to remember here that not the image itself has to be 48 dps, but rather the image including the padding, so all of the clickable area itself, as here in this example, for example. Now, where do we start? So there's so many types of disabilities we could not cover. So person might be struggling with attention disorder, and then the sudden pop-up would just distract the person, then, and it will not be comfortable. Then, or person might be having dyslexia. Then a lot of text on the screen is actually a very big challenge to read. Or the person might be colorblind, and then the usual signification of a green button is success, red button is failure, won't help, because they cannot perceive green or red. But we have to start somewhere. So I would say use previews. You can preview with different screen sizes and different dark mode, light mode, and it generates the same screen with all of the different types of layouts you could imagine. Use experimental emulator that you launch one device and it can simulate foldable or tablets, and that's a pretty comfortable thing to use. Do the UI check mode. So in each composable, you can start the UI check mode, which will verify it for accessibility problems. It gives sometimes some false positives with EAA, but still a very good tool to have. And use a pre-launch report to check what's your current app's accessibility issues that you have on your Play console. And accessibility scanner. It's a pretty cool app from Google that you install on your phone, you launch it, then you go to the app that you want to try out, to test. You use your normal user flow in this app, then you go back to the accessibility scanner, and then you see what problems the accessibility scanner encountered by testing your app. Now you might hear, whenever you try to pitch it to someone, you might hear it just an edge case. Let me show you some statistic to show that it's not. So 26.8% in you in 2023 reported activity limitation. So it's 1 in 4 people in EU aged from 16 and higher reported this. It goes higher with age, of course, but we also know that we have an aging population, so this number will just keep going up. Another statistic is from APT. 61% of Dutch Android users that have been surveyed here have 1 or more accessibility settings activated on their phone, and 25 had 2 or more. But from those 61, 24% have been using dark mode, and dark mode is also, for example, accessibility feature, and maybe just like me, who just like reading in the dark or sitting in the dark, and but still it's a big percentage. As well, this percentage is probably lower than it actually could have been because of poorly adapted apps. So the person might have tried to increase the font size on their phone, then they went to their favorite app and seen that all the layout is overlaid and no padding is respected, and therefore that might have forced the person to revert the accessibility setting on the phone. Or there is such terms called internalized ableism. And ableism is just a discrimination against people with or social prejudice, so to say, against physically or mentally disabled people. And internalized ableism is if the person really would be benefiting from accessibility. They have a disability themselves, but because they try so hard to fit in ableist society, they would intentionally refuse increase in font size, intentionally refuse the disability settings on their phones. Therefore, when we make our apps and we make them adaptive without this estimation of average user, we show this to these people that actually your way of using your phone is okay. We understand it. Every way is okay. And hopefully by doing that, we reduce the number of people struggling with this. But if you do not want to read all of these rules, and you want to just check your UI by using your gut feeling, you can still do it. All of these rules are based on 4 principles, which are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. What does it mean? Perceivable means that the user can identify and perceive the content on your screen by using their senses. So mainly it's visual senses, but as well it should be available in a textual representation and so on, and then audio. So do not rely on single sense. Then operability means that user is able to use the controls you have on the screen. They are able to interact with elements. So do not put weird controls like swipe with 5 fingers to dismiss, because it's exclusive. Understandable. Understandable means that user can comprehend what's happening on the screen. Meaning, do not use complicated abbreviation that user has to go somewhere in your help section to understand what those 3 letters actually mean. So use simple, understandable text, and robustness. User should be allowed to use the assistive tech that they actually want, and they make it comfortable, and our app should be robust enough to adapt to it. And be mindful of over-engineering, because you might think you develop some super innovative, cool UI, but it can be actually completely unclear to assistive technologies. And a poor check, what can I see? Can I understand how to interact with it? And can I interact with this? And then does it work with assistive tech? So you can go with this gut feelings. Next time, when we estimate a ticket, try to include accessibility from the start. Trust me, retrofitting accessibility requirements are so much harder. Therefore, estimate with it from the start. Do not expect waterfall. So most of the things I showed here, you might think, oh, they come from design or product decision, but you as a developer hold a lot of power and knowledge, and you know what's the best practice on your platform is, you know about the adaptive technologies and so on. Think of this POUR principle, these 4 principles, POUR, and write tests, use buttons when the buttons are needed, and so on, and make your UI adaptive. And try to get your team on board. It will probably be hard sometimes to convince the number-oriented people, that only revenue-based person, to improve your app accessibility, but you can show them the statistics from before. So 1 in 4 people, that's a user base that actually is being excluded. There's your potential users. Make the app for them. Or go extra step, check your competitors' apps, and hopefully your competitors' apps are better than yours. Then you go to your manager back and you say, hey, look, our competitors are so much more accessible than we are. Makes us look bad. Let's do something about it. Maybe this will work. And have empathy, and from the talk in today's morning, be ethical developer. So have empathy. We all sit in front of the computers all day long. It doesn't give us any good. It doesn't improve our eyesight in any way. And also, I think about my parents, and my friends' parents. I oftentimes seen them increase their font size. And as of recently, I thought, oh, that's a strange way to use a phone. It's an edge case. And it's ironic because it's a normal way, and they were using it for very long. And I really thought it's an edge case. And yeah, so try to not do that, and try to not create your apps for average users. And yeah, here's the links, and maybe I have some stickers with black hats if you want. And so please approach me for the stickers. And if you have some questions, I think we have time.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really, really interesting. I just got a question concerning the touchable size for the button. The fact that you can have an expandable zone area. What's the best practice when you have several buttons, let's say in a toolbar? that are and the area may be overlapping one with each other. Is it the best way to separate them from the exact size, or is it okay to have them?
You are, if I understood correctly, you are meaning this web slide?
No, it's about a button, the 48 dp of area. The fact that we can have a larger area, and if you have two of them in a toolbar, what's the best thing to do? To separate them evenly?
So probably you still cannot do the layout in a way that focus overlaps of the different buttons. Therefore, they will anyway be separated as far as I understand. So what you need to keep in mind that only the touchable area around the button.
Yeah.
So if the image doesn't fit, make it smaller. It's okay, but it still should be clickable.
Okay.
I don't know if I understood properly. If you want, you can find me afterwards. We can show
No problem. Thank you.
Actually, it's the first time I've ever heard about the European Accessibility Act. So thank you for that. It was very interesting. And do you know how it will be? I mean, you say that state will make sure that we are compliant, but how? I mean, if it's not Google or Apple, I mean, we probably won't do it. And it's always, sadly, it's always hard to sell that to the product team. And the legal thing is kind of interesting for this. And how do you know? Maybe the Play console will block us. I don't know. Do you know something about that? So how we will have to be compliant and.
So the question is how do you get to be compliant? So it's not a binary solution. So it's not like you're compliant here, you're not compliant. It's always a curve. So you have a specific level of compliancy that you have to follow. And as far as I understand, based on that, you will have different fines imposed of percentage of your revenue. So you cannot say, okay, we will leave some cash below the counter just to pay the fines with it, because I think it will be based on the percentage of what you're making. And who has to be compliant? So I think the most required basic services like banking, for example, consider a basic requirement, and they have to be compliant right away. And but it's always a curve. So you have to do your best and document your efforts, therefore, so you can show that we are actually doing our best, because you might not have a big team. Everyone understands that you are doing business, for example. You still have to bring some revenue. But this topic is very important, and you have to look into it. And you just follow this website that I showed you. If you want, as I said, an easy way, just read this resource. It has the rules. You drop down. It has the rules that you have to follow, and then you click there, and it will actually tell you what exactly you have to do. So this will give you 80% of what you would need.
Perfect. Thank you. And by the way, you mentioned dark mode too. Is it in the EAA? Okay. I still know some apps which are not compliant. So.
Yeah, so many. Yeah. Dark mode is accessibility settings.
Thank you for the presentation. Very, very interesting. In particular, that this is my main focus right now with my team. And I was wondering, within the context of a big company with multiple teams working at the same time, how to ensure that the work we are doing to improve the accessibility is actually not regressed from other teams. Like, is there any kind of automated tools that could allow us to prevent that from happening?
Understood. So the question is, can you prevent that accessibility get reversed because your other team changed something? I think you have the tests. If you have tests, you have UI tests, you can test for accessibility as well. And a good thing to know that accessibility is not something that once you have, you take it for granted. It's something once you have to keep so hard to keep it in your team. It's always difficult to keep the regressing, but hopefully tests will help you, and manual testing, and just when you do your feature, just randomly turn on the talkback and see if it's still fine. Other tools, I don't think I know. No.
The question is about views. which are not buttons but act like buttons, like image views, text views. We have a lot of this in our application with on-click modifier. And you show us how we can solve it using extension function. But does this mean we should use this extension function for all of views in our application? Could we solve this on application level, but not view?
Okay, the question is if we should use the extension that I showed here that actually specifies a role of a different view to another one. Like, yes, here. So you don't have to make all of your views have a role of a button, but just views that actually are looking like a button and doing the button job. So navigating user to a next element, for example, have to have a specific role to it. Because in Compose or in custom view, in Compose you use boxes, and boxes do not have a role as per se. They can be anything. Therefore, applying a role to it which specifies what it does, so we can have a role of text, for example, even though it can be just a box. I don't know if I got it properly, but you can find me. I think, and I think somewhere here had a question, but I don't know if you have time. So honestly, do we? No, I think we don't, but okay, should it?
I'll squeeze it in. Thank you for a great talk. I was just wondering, do you know how they will enforce these rules? Is someone from European Union going to go through the Play Store and send fines to everyone, or how would that work?
Yeah, so it's unclear to me. So they're supposed to have the checks on EU level. They have to have the commissions with different disability organizations that have actually interest in making everything accessible, and then we'll have to report it somehow. And as well, yeah, and the national authorities. They says the national authorities have to do the check, but they said how they will do it, not sure. I'm not sure. We'll have to see after the deadlines how it actually will be imposed, because there's all of the bureaucracy.
Just doesn't seem very easy to.
Yeah. And as far as I understand, also in Play Store. So when you do your app, you release your app, and if it's not accessible enough, it will not be so prioritized in the search. Therefore, it will probably also force your hand to be more accessible in this regards. I don't know the legal requirements so well. I'm just a developer. I think we are done, but if you have more questions, find me afterwards, and enjoy your break. Thank you so much.